Kenya Legacy Week 15 is done, which means we are formally and officially into our playoff run. We did have matchups to decide the number one overall, and we certainly had the matchup of the Kents, which was gearing up to be the match of the year. Maybe it didn't quite size up, to put it kind of loosely. Either way, it was an exciting week. I'm going to shut up for a second and get right to it, but just one quick note. I'm not doing the NFL breakdown. We have enough to talk about in terms of our matchups, and I want to do a little prediction instead. So we'll put that off to the very end, but right now let's jump straight into what happened during Week 15. Sometimes fantasy football makes no sense whatsoever. Teams squeak through. There's constantly teams that have monster weeks but run up against the wrong team, or a team that just scores very little and just squeaks by. And every once in a while you get a league winner who is the highest scoring and finished on one of the highest notes. I think you only had a couple weeks off of the last 8 where you weren't one of the top 2 or 3, always putting up a big fight. So Gene, congratulations. You take the regular season championship, which does come with some benefits, as we know, guaranteeing your number one spot. Now, unfortunately, we are a league that only does 4 in the playoffs, so you don't get a bye like some other league champions do. That's a problem we'll address for next year. But let's take a look as to how, and I'm going to actually start with Marco, because Marco, I feel like every single week I've said almost the same thing to you. You score somewhere, you've had some bad weeks, but you score somewhere in the 125 to 145, and I say, oh, if you would have played so-and-so, you would have won. Once again, you bump against the number one, I believe, and I'll do the big year-end wrap-up, but I'm pretty sure if I just to guess that you have probably the most points scored against. Haven't actually checked, but that's my guess. You had another decent week, and again, it's the same story. You probably would have beaten some people. You just didn't beat the guy that you played. Evans has been a great steal for you later round. Adams is finally playing a little bit more consistently, although I don't know if we can really bank this particular week. I mean, the Chargers-Vikings being on the Thursday got a lot of attention. Staley getting fired directly after. So I don't know if Adams is always going to have performances like this, but for you, it doesn't actually matter. Pollard, at least you get to stop paying attention to the most frustrating player in fantasy and probably the most disappointing running back in fantasy, and having to go back and forth with those decisions. Looking at your bench, you made most of the right calls. It wasn't going to help you out. If you weren't going to have teams or players go off like Gene did, you didn't have much to do with it. The reason I'm starting with you too, since we only have a league of 10 and since we do the playoffs the way we do, it means the bottom 2 teams, the 9 and the 10, your season is done. You don't even get the consolation. One of the many reasons why I want to flip to 6 teams making it in next year, so we can figure that out. I can answer questions if you don't understand how that works. So Marco, your season comes to an end. Sorry, pal, but you put up a fight to the bitter end. Gene, now on to you. You win for a reason. 186, monster week. It's like everything you touch just goes to gold. You had a massive quarterback issue. We talked about people like, I dropped Carr earlier in the week because he was horrible. I think he put up one of the top scores of the week. Flacco, I mean, we're all waiting for him to get overly frustrated. And if you actually watch him, occasionally he throws that ball up there and you don't know what he's thinking, hence the 3 picks. But 374 yards. Can't mess with that. Your big guys, though, I mean, Williams has been huge since coming back. In fact, he was the pre and post his injury constant staple in the top 5. He was again. He was our running back 3. TJ Hawkinson always puts up a good one. He wasn't actually in our top 5, but he did just as well for you by hitting it. I'd say the steal, though, aside from your quarterbacks, and number 1, so I don't forget them, Chicago actually was our defense 3, but the second highest defense that was started, Las Vegas, not surprisingly, against the Chargers, had our best defense, but no one touched them. Ty Chandler, great pickup. Madison went down. You threw him in your flex spot. He got you a solid 26, so can't really mess with that. In terms of your bench, though, you actually could have been even better. You did not make the wise decisions as it comes to wide receivers. Waddle was our wide receiver 1. Godwin was our wide receiver 3, so this actually could have been worse. How does that bode for you next week moving ahead? Actually, we'll put a pause on that. I'm going to get to that when I look ahead at our matchups, but just to say once again, congratulations to our regular season champion, Q, aka Gene the Machine. Now, I can't be too mad. Scoring almost 185, I'll take that any given week. However, it looked beforehand, and it definitely looks now, like this was going to be a repeat matchup unless something crazy happened. So if I could have saved the 185 for next week, if I'm being picky, because I think beating Connor and Sheamus is tough enough as it is, but beating him twice in a row, I know it shouldn't matter, but I believe in the weird momentum stuff. So I am going to go over somewhat quickly because I'm going to save all the preview stuff for the next bit. But how did I manage? St. Brown was just out of the top 5 because wide receivers actually did have some good high peak performances, but I was super pumped with him. But realistically for me, having consistent quarterback play, which was fine. My Cleveland defense was in the top 5. They were the 5th one. And against Chicago, I was pretty pumped with that. But the biggest thing, obviously, having Cook go off, the Bills decide that all they want to do is run now. I hope they keep that up. If he could have a back-to-back performance. It's actually been a couple weeks in a row where he's been quite solid, so I'll take that. I did leave some points on the bench. Walker, I did not think would go off against Philly like he did. And certainly, I always liked the gimmicky tight end, but I don't know if it's likely he starts next week considering what happened on my bench. Connor Sheamus, I think you kind of fell victim to a couple things. I mean, your guys did just fine. Trey McBride was our tight end 3 with 22 points from your tight end. I think you'd take it. Gibbs obviously had a great game, and again, he was out early, so you knew you had a few points in the bag before we even got started. He was our running back 4. Wilson overperforming. Indy's defense wasn't in our top 5, but looked like it was going to be actually tied with Cleveland here, so it wasn't our top 5. Sorry, I forgot to write that part down. Tied for 5th. Mahomes, obviously, you're a little bummed that Kadarius Toney keeps smacking the ball to the other team, and unfortunately, that's Mahomes' interception, not Toney's. But realistically, you're a bummer. Diggs, I ran the ball. You tried to catch it. Didn't really happen there. That's an underperformance. But Bijan Robinson, I've already gone on my Arthur Smith rant. I don't think anyone knows what to do with this kid at this point. He gets 25 touches and looks amazing one week, and then gets 5 opportunities to do anything the following week, and we never really know why. You did have some people on the bench. Not all of them went off, but you have your options moving forward, and you've always been a good mover and shaker on the free agent wire. Now, obviously, for you, you've got some people on the IR, one who's off the IR, so you'd have to drop someone to start making those moves. But I would be shocked if this is the lineup I see next week, so I will save that for the next part. But yay for me, but realistically, this is all about next week. While the last matchup was all about last week, this was all about the Kents, and this was all about this week, and yet I could have seen a number of things happening. A 100-point victory? Didn't see that in the cards. Now, part of this was, and I'm sorry, but I'm not rooting for or against anybody in any situation. You want it as tight as you can, and for both of you, I wanted it to be a tough fight. Rushke, you got to check your roster, pal. I mean, it's. I understand if you're busy, you probably were. Maybe you were away. Maybe you were flying, and maybe this was the worst time of all time, but having Hill in your lineup and getting the bagel, you were out off the get-go. But let's be honest, Dallas also got pumped by Buffalo. You didn't have a whole lot on the bench. Now, you could have put Myers in, and that could have been 15 more points, and you could have put in, Gus the Bus instead of Sanders, and that would have gotten you 10 more. But that would have got you to 100. You had Fields massively disappoint against my Browns there, and you definitely had Allen, who actually managed the game really well, but they just ran like crazy and did not pass at all. So this was in the stars for you, and especially you look at Maxon here. He came out guns a-blazing. He knew this was the big one. He had to be so bummed when Najee did what he did, but he didn't need it. Goff went off, right? 5 touchdowns. Get out of here. That's crazy. Now, he was actually only a quarterback 2. Surprisingly enough, there was multiple quarterbacks with 4 touchdowns, by the way, this week. Probably one of the most I can remember. You got to be bummed with Najee, but you got to be just in awe of Christian McCaffrey. Sometimes the best just produce in the biggest spots. If you even watch this game, he was so open on his receiving touchdown. He actually fell over, got up, and then kind of walked into the end zone. Like it wasn't a sprint. 3 touchdowns all day, over 200, around 200 all-purpose yards. Can't mess with that, right? With a ton of receptions. Addison as well, huge. I mean, I think that was a gutsy play. Jefferson was coming back. No one really knew how Minnesota was going to react. Backup quarterback, odd situations. Since his defense has been randomly decent, Addison was a phenomenal start, 100 plus in the 2 touchdowns. He was our wide receiver 2. McCaffrey, obviously our running back 1. I think that just goes without saying. Put that all together, you got a monster performance. Even San Francisco against Arizona, 13 points, I would take it. You made all the right calls. It would have been crazy if you would have played the Chargers. You do have some people coming off injury next week, so you're going to have some decisions to make. It would not shock me if your lineup looked pretty similar, unless you want to make an ad drop at some point. But in the Battle of the Kents, one stood tall, and I'm sorry, Rushke, but one just didn't add up. both out of the playoffs, but both want to make sure they play for consolation. Remember, only top 8 gets to keep playing, even though they will be separated as of next week. So Tim and Jeff, you went after it. So great matchup. One of our tightest ones. Could have used a matchup like this, actually, for the Battle of the Kents, but in this particular case, it went out pretty well. I'll go through pretty quickly. Now, the person I alluded to before that actually technically outscored, we had Baker Mayfield as our number 1 quarterback, just barely. Cup finally making his way in the top 5. I think this is 2 weeks all year he's done so, and he was our wide receiver 4. Now, granted, Jefferson came back. You got to be happy at least he played a healthy game. Got to bode well for you moving forward. Laporta's looking like a stud. He was our tight end 1, get 3 touchdowns, be tight end 1. That makes sense to me. Miami was our best started defense because, as I mentioned, no one took Vegas, so they were our defense 2, but our number 1 that we started. So fantastic job, Timmer. You came on strong at the end there, and now you've earned your way to compete in the consolation. Jeff, same. You start off the season pretty rough, pal, and you've been coming back playing spoiler, pretty much on the shoulders of some of your big guns. Now, Etienne was normally a fairly big gun, but he's had an off couple weeks in a row. But Purdy was fantastic. He was our quarterback 3. He was one of those people I mentioned before with the 4 touchdowns. Higgins woke up, which was probably nice for all those Cincinnati fans. Stafford as well, having a great week. He was outside of our top 5, but I think you got to be happy with how he's rounded out the year. So well done, sir, and I believe you will live to play a consolation game. I should say Samuel did not finish in the top 5, but obviously had a great outing. So you both move on, at least on the consolation side, which I will be previewing in just a couple more matchups. In our lowest scoring matchup, we had people who just unfortunately were on the other side of that offensive bubble. Rennie, you also will be bidding us farewell in this particular case, finishing 10th. You don't get a consolation berth, so this is the last week that you'll be doing some of the updates here. But Dax Prescott, obviously against Buffalo, I think people maybe assume Buffalo's defense might give him a tough time, but not this tough. He really didn't get the offensive going at all, and you paid the price. Pierce as well in the decimal points. McLovin was kind of your only bright spot here. He was in our top 5. He was our wide receiver 5, and even Philly's D last night. I thought maybe they get after it a little bit more nasty, but unfortunately, not so much. You did have Palmer on the bench, but he's actually injury reserve bench, so he is back, and he might be someone that you could have put in, but doesn't look like it. In terms of Woody, bad luck a couple weeks ago. Obviously, you went down and you're trying to recover now. Now you are in the consolation, and you're the kind of person who I feel you're competitive enough that you might actually even watch some football over Christmas. Hurts had kind of a disappointing performance last night, but at least he got you some touchdowns, so he added in. Rice has been a huge pickup for you. I have him in other leagues, and I'm thrilled with it. New Orleans, in terms of our defense, was just around and just outside. They were our defense 4. I apologize. I keep writing that down funky. And you had enough guys to kind of keep you in the fight. So you took the win on this one. You probably had it anyway. Singletary, Njoku, you had some talent on the bench, and Njoku did actually crack the top 5. He was our tight end 2, so he's an option for you, I think, moving forward. But Rennie, you will be included on all the yearly wrap-ups, but for the next couple of weeks when we start looking at the playoffs, you're not going to be around. Woody, like I said, you're the kind of guy that probably wants to pop off, maybe win that consolation championship, be the person who's a little bigger than the moment, so let's see how it goes. In terms of those matchups, now that we've wrapped these up, let's see what happens when we start getting into the playoffs. As I said, we're moving into week 16. As we click over, it gives us our bracket. So we're top 4 and then 5 through 8, just like the seeds suggest. In terms of our standings, just if you were curious, remember you can go back. We did have a clear winner, technically a tie here, although about 100 points in between. And like I said, it was quite close for the highest scoring team, but with Gene going off and Rushke giving us our low, Gene did cement it and did finish as our overall number 1 in everything that matters, both points and wins. So congrats on that. As it relates to our actual playoffs, let's start with the consolation semis. We know Jeff loves to play spoiler, and we know Kent has either been a monster or a mouse. So is this going to be about who Hill plays? I mean, he's got Dallas's defense. That could be tough, but he's got Fields with a phenomenal matchup. Fields is actually projected to be the QB4 against Arizona. I believe it. Sometimes I do not believe in the projections in this particular case. I think it could happen. Now, the only Debbie Downer for Kent is Dallas is going against Miami, another really tough offense on the road, and Dallas has shown they can't really play on the road. I don't know if people have figured that out. They keep saying Dallas is a roller coaster. They're not really. They're just a phenomenal home team, and they're a crap bag away team. Think things. But Allen as well could be an interesting one. The Chargers secondary can't stop anybody, but Buffalo showed they love to run, so will they go back to some throwing and get Allen some more chances? Yahoo Predicted thinks so, because they got him predicted as the number 2 quarterback. but only time will tell. Jeff, you've got the potential MVP in the league in Purdy going against Baltimore's D, so that's actually a tough matchup for you. But then you got Stafford going against New Orleans D. I'd say that's a favorable matchup for you, and they've been showing that offense has got a high ceiling. You're going to be one of those guys, though, just like in the last couple of weeks, you tend to win by everybody scoring. I mean, Kittle is prone to have a good performance, and obviously that's a double down for you. You got Smith against the Giants. You got to love that particular matchup in a game that Philly actually would like to win because they got bumped down to the 5 seed, but with, Miami and playing Dallas, I think they're optimistic that maybe they can still take the title. Looking on your bench, you both have some choices to make and maybe some moves to make. So this looks like a competitive, and I'd say pretty challenging, consolation semifinal. ... As long as Rushke pays attention, just check before the roster, or in Jeff's case, don't. Woody and Tim going after it. Now this could be another pretty competitive matchup. Two people who I know will be checking, or at least I think we would be. Tim, you've come back from the beginning of the year where I wasn't so sure, and now it's a couple in a row, although I do know you're traveling in a place, so 50-50 here. You had Mayfield, who went off last week. Now he's not projected to do very well, but projections are projections. Let's see what happens. You got Jones coming back off the injury, so you got to be happy with that. And Jefferson possibly maybe putting up another solid performance, or maybe even getting back to form with Laporta showing that he might be the tight end one by the year end. Woody, you're kind of hoping for a bounce back from Philadelphia, but now the Giants is the team that they can do it against. They actually play them 2 out of the next 3 weeks, but only 2 of them matter to us. Hurts is the predicted quarterback one, so we'll see how that happens. Eckler's been a huge disappointment, but Mostert's been a huge benefit for you. So you got the studs, you got the horses. It's just a matter if they show up on Christmas Day. On the championship side, we have Gene the Machine, who has run through the league, going against Maxon, who had to fight harder than anyone else to get here. So this one should be pretty tight. I think, like most things at this point in the year, it's going to come down to opportunity and health, right? We've got Chase here, who should be doing okay, but we'll see how his health is and whether that questionable is really questionable. Addison, okay, looking at whether Jefferson looks like he's fully back, but it didn't affect his role. Najee is very script dependent, so if it's rainy and it's close in Cincinnati, I do expect him to get the ball a little bit more, but who knows? And he's got essentially, if he's healthy, he's going to produce in Christian McCaffrey. Gene, on your side, I mean, let's be honest. I'm going to look at your bench here quick because you make a lot of moves, adds, shakes. Like I said, you got Jacobs coming off the break. Waddle's coming back. Taylor might be coming back. I would expect that this is not what your lineup looks like, although there's a few people we can assume. Now, in terms of quarterbacks, there were a few on the waiver wire. Not many, because you seem to take most of them that involve with injury, but AOC was available, and he actually was our quarterback 4 after last week. But is Vegas going to put up the points like they did against the Chargers next week? Only time will tell. There is also a few other people. Rudolph with his nose so bright might be available for Christmas because apparently Trubisky's out. But realistically, I think you get most of your points on people like the Debos. Williams has been great. Hawkinson's been consistent. Is Chandler going to actually come back? Is Madison out or is Chandler in? So I would expect that this is actually a waste of my time because I would be willing to bet there's at least 4 or 5 adds and changes in here. I expect they're predicted to be tight. And honestly, I expect this one to go down to the wire. I think this one, you want to win, score 170 or more. In our final matchup prediction for next week, I think same but different. I expect I'm going to have to score in the 160, 170, 180 to have a shot at taking Connor and Sheamus down. He has some better matchups than he had last week. I think Diggs, everyone's been able to throw on the Chargers, so unless they're just committed to run, which, spoiler alert, I'm kind of hoping they are, I expect a bounce back there. Bijan, flip a coin, close your eyes, who knows? But I think everybody else is going to be pretty consistent. I fully expect Lamb to be coming back and his wide receivers to be putting up a fight. His tight end has been one of the hottest tight ends in the league and is actually getting to the point where he's almost predicted to do so. This one will go down to the wire. I think this one's going to be super tight. Maybe a defensive battle. All right, maybe the flexes will decide. Who knows? Either way, I'm getting excited. Now we know playoffs are set. Consolation playoffs are set. That's exciting for a lot of people too. Hey, don't be too proud. You want to finish 5th. Why wouldn't you? If you can win, you can win. But our top 4, we know the matchups. We know in fantasy, it doesn't just matter what you score. It's what you're against. Super excited to see what happens this week in terms of ads, drops. Do pay attention. I know family people or people who are traveling a lot on the holidays, it is a little bit more difficult, but pay attention to the schedule. We got Thursday night game with college football out. They are putting some on Saturday still. I believe there's only 2 though, but you can double check me. A bunch on Sunday on Christmas Eve, and then even a couple on Christmas Day to really test your resolve and see if you're paying attention to some last minute injuries if you're unfortunate enough to be in that situation. So I'll be getting back to you next week during Boxing Day. I'll be back in Geneva. I can't express to you, this is the best time of year, not just for the presents and stuff. This is our gift, football and whatnot. So hope everyone's doing well. Merry Christmas to all, and best of luck to our top 4.